Business Adventures by John Brooks. Do you know how the Xerox company started? How do stock prices go up and down? What is insider trading? In the 1950s, Ford Motors flopped. Do you know this? Do you know about the scam of General Electric? If you didn't know all this, you will learn from this book. Its author, John Brooks, has been a New Yorker contributor for a long time and has written many books on business and finance. This book was first published in 1969. Bill Gates had said that of all the books he has read so far, Business Adventures is the best book on business adventures. Xerox. Xerox became so successful that copying became synonymous with Xerox. Xerox fully embraced the business trends of the 19th century. A family started this company. It was a small investment, faced many difficulties in the beginning. The company was named in classical Greek style, and then the company made a mark in the market. But what sets Xerox apart from others is its commitment, its corporate responsibility. In 1880, if a lawyer or businessman needed copies of a document, his clerk would write many copies by hand. Then, in 1950, typewriters and carbon paper came. Office employees used carbon paper to make copies or made copies with a typewriter. In 1950, 3 copier machines were released in the market: Thermofax, Autostat, and Kodak's Verifax, but all of them had some problem. For example, Kodak's Verifax produced damp copies which had to be dried before use, and it used a special paper supplied by the company. Then Xerox Corporation made a breakthrough in the copier machine world by creating its time's best and reliable copier machine. This machine produced permanent, good quality dry copies through the process of xerography, and that too using ordinary paper. In 1966, Xerox Corporation's sales reached up to $500 million. Xerox Corp was previously called the Haloid Company. It was started in Rochester, New York in 1906. In 1906, Haloid only made photographic paper. Like other companies in Rochester, Haloid was also running because of Eastman Kodak. But the Haloid Company had survived the time of depression. After World War II, competition had increased significantly, and so had labor costs. Haloid now wanted to make some new products. A 32-year-old inventor from Queens, Chester Carlson, worked in the patent department of an electronic company. Chester was trying to make an office copier machine in his spare time, and in 1938 he succeeded. This machine emitted a lot of smoke and odor when used, but it copied text from one paper to another, known as October 22nd 38 Astoria. Chester called this process electrophotography, which used light, heat, and electrostatic charge. Chester took his invention around for 5 years. It went to all the companies making office equipment. Finally, in 1944, he succeeded in convincing the Battelle Memorial Institute. Chester had become wealthy by licensing his invention for royalties. Joseph Wilson, the president of Haloid Company, saw the potential of this copier machine. Haloid acquired full patent rights of Chester Carlson's work. The company had also covered the machine's development project. It took Haloid more than 10 years to develop this copier machine, and the company spent $75 million on it. Wilson and other company executives had invested in the company for compensation. Some had put in their personal savings, and some had even mortgaged their homes. In 1958, Haloid Company changed its name to Haloid Xerox. This name was somewhat like Eastman's Kodak, but the Xerox trademark also became very popular. Before the release of the copier machine, there was a lot of tension and nervousness in the company, but in 1960, Xerox finally took off. Xerox copier machine became a huge success story. The company's stock prices were soaring, and whoever invested in this company became rich. In 1961, Haywood Xerox became Xerox Corporation. The company had to take rights of the word Xerox because now this word was being widely used in common language. Its inventor, Chester Carlson, came 66th in the Fortune list of richest people. The executives of the company got back 1,000 times what they had invested in the company. The biggest role in Xerox's success was played by its purpose, which executives called the Xerox spirit, because the company understood its responsibility towards its customers, employees, and stockholders. But even more than that, there was a feeling of social responsibility within Xerox. From 1965 to 1966, Xerox donated almost $4 million to different charities and universities. Joseph Wilson is a very humble and soft-spoken person who believes in community service along with running the company. Sometimes, stockholders complained that the company was giving their money to charities. Not only this, Xerox was often criticized for taking a stand on social issues. But Joseph Wilson says, university education, Negro employment, and civil rights are our issues. I hope we will continue to show courage on those issues which we feel right about, even if people criticize. A reasonable amount of time. Insiders at Texas Gulf Sulphur. The Texas Gulf Sulphur scam is a classic case of insider trading. Company executives started buying stocks of Texas Gulf as soon as a major mineral deposit was discovered. Not only that, they also encouraged their friends and family members to invest in it. After the SEC filed a case, the matter became quite controversial. Texas Gulf, a New York-based company, was in search of other mineral sources due to the low market value of sulfur. Then in Ontario, Canada, the company obtained ownership of a mining ground and started digging there. Kidd 55 was a popular mining area where a significant gold deposit was considered. Richard Clayton, a Texas Gulf engineer, was the first person to survey this area. He reached there with his team to conduct the first test drill hole. Company geologist Kenneth Dark was also with the team. These people dug 150 feet deep in 3 days. Dark studied the core of the mineral deposit and then immediately called Chief Geologist Walter Holick. Holick called his superior company's Vice President Richard Mollison, who then called his boss Charles Fogarty, an executive vice president and number 2 man in the company. The next day, Fogarty, Mollison, and Holick all visited the site in Canada. It was November and snowing heavily. Geologists Holick and Dark continued digging. After digging 600 feet, they found some copper and zinc content in the drill core. Most of the minerals flow like veins inside the ground, and if there is a little mineral deposit somewhere, there is a high chance of finding more inside the ground. Then comes the question of how much mineral deposit can be there at that place. So Texas Gulf engineers created patterns of several holes from the first hole. These holes hit the ore at different angles, which filled the veins' width. While all this was happening, the supervisors were already planning their moves. Interestingly, on November 12th, Fogarty bought 300 shares of Texas Gulf stock. He added 1,400 more after a few days. Clayton also bought 200 shares on the 15th, and Mollison bought 100 shares. Holick's wife also bought 50 shares on the 29th and added another 100 on the 10th. The spring season came, but Texas Gulf's drilling activity was still ongoing. The team felt that the first hole wasn't very deep. Zinc, copper, and silver deposits were showing significant mineral deposits from the third and fourth holes. At this point, Canadian mining circles began to doubt this discovery. Canadian newspapers started publishing reports about Texas Gulf activity. The Toronto Daily Star wrote, "The magic word on every street corner and in every barber shop is Texas Gulf." This news reached the White House soon. On April 10th, President Stevens became very concerned. He called a council of his trusted associates. Thomas Lamont, a senior board member of Texas Gulf and a partner at J.P. Morgan, was there. Lamont told the president that until this frenzy is in the Canadian press, you might be able to live with them. But Lamont was proved wrong. The next morning, stories about Texas Gulf were printed in the Times and the Herald Tribune. The Herald even printed the news on the front page, saying, "The biggest ore strike since gold was discovered more than 60 years ago in Canada." And the prices of Texas Gulf stocks were soaring on Wall Street. Officers at Texas Gulf headquarters issued a press release. President Stephen was also present in this press release, along with Texas Gulf's number 2 man, Fogarty. Company Secretary David Crawford wrote, "Texas Gulf Company has struck a large deposit of zinc, copper, and silver. 7 drill holes have been made, and the ore body is 800 feet long, 300 feet wide, and more than 800 feet deep. This is a major discovery. Preliminary data indicates that there is more than 25 million tons of ore inside the ground." And on the same day, in New York, company engineers Clayton and Secretary Crawford were calling their brokers to buy Texas Gulf stocks. Clayton bought 200 shares, while Crawford ordered 300. That same evening, Crawford called his broker again and doubled his order. The Texas Gulf trial began in April 1964. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, filed a strong case and appealed to the court. Trials and hearings went on for a long time, and finally, in 1968, the SEC won the case. Most of the company's executives were found guilty. The Texas Gulf scam had become a big lesson in the corporate world. Today, insider trading is considered a serious crime. The Impacted Philosophers, Non-Communication at GE. General Electric, one of the top 5 companies in the U.S., had 300,000 employees and annual sales of $4 billion. Its headquarters were in Lexington Avenue, New York. In 1960, GE was involved in a major scam. The company was facing a case of violating Sherman Law. There were a total of 29 companies involved, and GE was the largest among them, charged with overpricing. The government bought large and expensive equipment for public utilities like transformers and generators. For example, a 500,000-watt turbine generator that converts steam into electricity cost $16 million. GE, along with Westinghouse and other companies, inflated prices of electronic equipment. Some products were overpriced up to $4 million. This scam lasted from 1956 to 1959. For 3 years, executives enjoyed the taxpayers' money. It was also found that executives used code numbers for companies in their secret meetings. They called each other from public booths and their homes to avoid being caught. But one employee exposed everyone, and state witness became ready. The Antitrust Division of the Justice Department investigated this case, and upon being found guilty, GE had to pay a fine of $500,000. Charges were filed against 11 executives of the company, and 3 of them received jail sentences. The biggest controversy was that all the high-positioned executives of GE and Westinghouse escaped clean. The presidents and chairmen of both companies claimed they had no knowledge of it, but Judge Gainey said, One would be most naive to believe that these violations of the law are completely unknown to them. I am convinced that the staffs were torn between conscience and rewards of promotion, comfortable security, and large salaries. The convicted executives paid the fine and served jail time. GE's business continued as usual. The expected losses were incurred, but the extra money taken from the general public was never returned. The Fluctuation, the Little Crash, in 1962. A big famous story of Wall Street involves legendary founder J.P. Morgan and a young broker. It happened that the young broker went to J.P. Morgan to ask what would happen next in the stock market, to which Morgan replied, "It will fluctuate." And as he said, it happened. Stock market rates have been going up and down since the world's first stock exchange was established in 1611. In May 1962, there was a historical fluctuation in the New York Stock Exchange when the market crashed for 3 days. Historian Joseph de la Vega believed that traders are very clever in inventing reasons which causes sudden fluctuations in stock prices. They provide graphs, analysis, and explanations in the news beforehand, but the stock market's behavior also depends a lot on investors' moods. The crash of 1962 started on May 28th, Monday, when Dow Jones reported that major industrial stocks would decline. By lunchtime, mass hysteria began to spread. During those days, there were no big monitors in the NYSE to show stock prices. Instead, tickets or print tapes were used. But these machines had a problem. They couldn't update rapid fluctuations. Reports from the tape were 30 minutes late by 11 a.m. Due to this delay, investor selling activity suddenly increased. People started gathering at the Merrill Lynch office to liquidate their stocks. Due to the bank's central location, small-time security traders and individual investors always came here to invest in stocks, and a 30-minute delay mattered a lot. By 2 p.m., the tape was already an hour behind, and there was no way to fix this damage. Brokers were busy taking calls from customers, trying to keep them calm and appealing to them to keep their stocks. But many people were not ready to listen. A customer from Rio de Janeiro sent a telegraph saying, "Please sell everything in my account," and Merrill Lynch had no choice but to do so. Due to tape delays, brokers could only tell customers how much they would get from selling. People were yelling at each other in the Merrill Lynch office, wanting detailed trade reports. It was simply a case of all stocks declining rapidly on enormous volume. There was fear and anxiety among sellers. The decline of blue-chip stocks was causing the market to go down. Prices of AT&T, IBM, and Standard Oil stocks were falling, spreading a strange panic among investors. Brokers were trying their best to keep the situation under control. One broker recalls, "I remember feeling exhausted. On the day of any crisis, you end up walking around the office 10 to 12 miles. When the closing bell rang at 3:30, everyone in the office started cheering. We weren't cheering because the market was down, but because the day was over." That day saw losses of up to $20 million in stocks. The effect of the New York Stock Exchange crash reached Brussels, London, and Zurich. And it was the strong mutual funds that calmed the situation. Mutual fund investors couldn't liquidate their stocks so easily. According to the rules, they had to sell some stocks first. Stock prices were low on Monday afternoon, but by Tuesday, the situation started to improve, and by Thursday, the fluctuation cycle stopped. The Dow Jones average was 9.40 points, but by Monday morning, the prices had gone slightly higher. Finally, It was the mutual funds that stabilized the market because such investments are considered conservative. Mutual fund owners had to sell their shares, but they had also bought more shares during the peak of the crash. Democrats and Republicans passed some more laws so that the stock market could be regulated, although such crashes cannot be avoided in the stock exchange. Historian De La Vega said, "It is foolish to think that you can withdraw from the exchange after you have tasted the sweetness of the honey." The Fate of the Edsel, a Cautionary Tale. In 1957, Ford Motor Company introduced the Edsel car, but it turned out to be a major flop. Time magazine said, "The Edsel was a classic case of the wrong car for the wrong market at the wrong time." 1955 was the year of the automotive boom. U.S. General Motors sold more than 7 million cars with a common stock of around $325. Ford wanted to create a new medium-priced model. In those days, American cars were long, wide, with powerful engines, some gadgets, and an exterior of chrome color. Ford promoted their car Edsel with a lot of promotion and advertisement because they were confident that their new car would make a mark in the market. It was hoped that up to 200,000 units would be sold in the first year of release, but that didn't happen. 2 years later, only 109,466 Edsel cars were sold, and most of them were purchased by Ford executives, dealers, and salesmen themselves. The company incurred a loss of nearly $350 million from Edsel, and Ford halted the production of the car. But how did all this happen? How could such a big company make such a mistake? In 1948, Ford had only one medium-priced car, which was Mercury. Low-income earners bought Chevrolets, Plymouths, and Fords. But as soon as their annual income reached $5,000, they would buy a medium-priced car. Those who had low-priced Fords didn't buy the medium-priced Mercury. Instead, people bought Pontiac or Buick in exchange for their Fords. The former vice president said, "We have been growing customers for General Motors." The name and design of Edsel were supposed to be according to the popular and conventional fashion of that time, but instead of that, the name Edsel was given on the name of Henry Ford's only son. And instead of the car design of that time, Ford experimented. Roy Brown, in charge of Edsel's design, said, "Our goal was to create a car so unique that it would stand out among the designs of the 19th century cars." On the day of Edsel's release, its division manager, Richard Kraft, said that Edsel's design was different from others, and the car could be identified from the front, rear, and sides, and its interior was the epitome of the push-button era. Edsel could have done well if it had been released a few years later, when the trend of small and less powerful compact cars emerged. According to Time magazine, Edsel was a perfect example of the limitations of market research, with its depth interviews and motivational mumbo-jumbo. Overall, the Edsel designers created a product that they wanted, not what the public wanted. And on top of that, many of these cars were defective. Once a man went to Hudson River, he had ordered a double shot that his brand new Edsel's dashboard caught fire. And many other people also complained about the car, such as oil leaks, sticking hoods, faulty accessories, inferior sheet metal, and poor paint. But the failure of Edsel did not make much difference to the company because its other models like Falcon, Comet, and Mustang had a good review in the market. Ford quickly compensated for all its losses. Although the company's stock prices dropped, Everything was fine after 2 years. Edsel executives and creators remained in the company, but other white-collar workers were continuously laid off from 1957 to 1958. Many others also suffered a lot of losses. Many dealers went bankrupt. Conclusion. In this book summary, we have told you about the fluctuations and stock market crash of 1962. Fluctuations in the market are created by traders' buying and selling activity. Avoiding a stock market crash is almost impossible because as long as there are risk takers and gamblers in the stock market, this will continue. However, government regulation is also important to protect public interest. You have learned about Ford Motor and their failed product Edsel. It is essential in any business to understand that you should make the product that the market wants. Entrepreneurs cannot impose their choices on customers. You have also learned about the insider trading scam of Texas Gulf Sulphur here. We have also told you about the overpriced scam of General Electric. Insider trading and price fixing are both serious corporate crimes. Finally, we have told you the success story of Xerox. More than a winning product, Xerox owes its success to their sense of social responsibility. Xerox has a purpose that is bigger than their profit sense and individual interest, and that's why the company's long-term success journey continues today.